4 dust-stained wagons clattered across the old wooden bridge leading into Iron Bend, shattering the holy hush of a Montana dawn in 1876. Before we kick off to this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. A red haze of dust swirled behind them, blotting out the weather-beaten buildings at the trail's end. On the porch of the trading post, Belle Rowan set her cup of sage tea on the rail and watched in silence. A single silver streak in her black hair caught the newborn sunlight. Her eyes stayed steady and sharp, the eyes of someone who had stared death down more than once and never flinched. Before we ride further into this tale of hidden strength and old frontier wisdom, don't forget to follow our story tomorrow. We'll share the untold battles of White Elk. At Belle's bare feet, Thunder, her black-furred wolf dog, rose without a sound, a low growl forming as Marshal Zane Porter stepped down from the lead wagon. 2 strangers in crisp Eastern suits followed close behind. Belle laid a copper-toned hand on Thunder's head, a small touch that calmed the animal, but didn't break the tension. Beneath her back, the bone-handled knife warmed like live coal, a weight she hadn't felt this strongly since the night 8 years ago that had changed her life forever. She was heir to combat rights passed through 10 generations. The carved sign of the old store creaked in the morning wind as the visitors drew near, boots heavy on the dirt. Their measuring eyes lingered on the lone widow who had settled here 3 months earlier, stirring little more than a few prairie whispers. "Marshal Porter, what business brings you here so early?" Belle asked. Her tone was even, but carried an undercurrent of iron that made the 2 strangers trade glances. One hand slid a hair closer to the hidden blade, while she kept a calm front of frontier courtesy. "Mrs. Rowan, this here is Cyrus Flint and Grant Steele from Silver Creek Mining," Porter said, removing his hat with uneasy respect. "They're inquiring about land deeds, especially ones with thin paperwork." Cyrus stepped forward, his fine coat a sharp contrast to the weather-scarred porch. "Mrs. Rowan, we understand you came into this property in unusual fashion after old Turner passed," he said, his smile never reaching his cold blue eyes. The sun flashed on his gold pocket watch as he gestured toward the hills. "Silver Creek is ready to pay handsomely, 3 times its worth for this place." Grant Steele, shorter and smoother, drew out papers from a leather folder, his manicured fingers betraying no frontier labor. "We've already secured agreements from most landowners nearby, including the McKay family to the south and Nora Pike to the east," he added. Belle raised the cup to her lips, letting the herbal steam shield her face for a breath, one of the centering habits White Elk had drilled into her under pitiless desert suns. "This land isn't for sale," she said quietly, a river-deep certainty in her voice. "Not now. Not ever." Her unblinking gaze made Cyrus shift on his boots. His practiced smile stayed, but a flash of anger burned in his eyes before he masked it. "Mrs. Rowan, the territory is changing fast," he warned. "Then I'll grow used to the noise," Belle replied, her look as immovable as the mesas that had outlasted centuries of trespassers. Thunder tensed beneath her, catching the change in her spirit. Grant tried again, softening his words, but not the threat. "Our opening offer is $2,700, well above market. Mr. Flint authorizes $3,200 considering your attachment to the place." It had been 3 years since Wade Rowan was lowered into the earth, 3 years since Belle stood beside the hand-built coffin of the kind storekeeper whose laughter once filled this post like summer thunder. The building still stood firm, tended with the same devotion Wade had taught her through 14 years of marriage. Iron Bend's townsfolk respected the quiet widow who brought herbs and fine handwork to market each month. Her booth was always neat, her dealings brief, her faint smile never quite touching her eyes. They whispered in awe that grief had turned her from a warm neighbor into a distant shadow. They didn't know, couldn't guess, that Belle Rowan had lived another life before she bore Wade's name, before she learned ledgers and salves. She had been Eleanor Two Rivers, a girl who from 9 to 23 trained under White Elk, one of the last keepers of the sacred Apache knife traditions. Those lessons braided lethal skill with survival wisdom and secret rites passed only to the worthy. Belle had never glorified violence. The blade to her was pure will, a shield in a world stingy with mercy. Wade had known every part of this truth from the day they met, and loved her the more for it. "That's Eleanor Two Rivers," he had said with quiet pride. "But I'm in love with Belle Rowan, the woman you choose to be each day." She believed that choice final until now. Facing these men with their crisp papers and hidden threats, she felt a cold certainty settle over her heart. Perhaps the warrior within had only been sleeping, waiting for this very dawn to wake again. Perhaps her long quiet had never truly ended, only waited for the right spark to rouse it. When the wagons finally vanished into the copper-red haze, Belle Rowan stayed on the porch, still as a carved statue, replaying every word. Thunder leaned into her leg, reading the shift in her spirit, while she sorted each thought with deliberate calm. Later that afternoon, as Belle clipped white sage in the herb garden behind the trading post, the soft, measured sound of hooves reached her ears. This rider carried no menace. A paint horse stopped beyond the fence, and Marshal Zane Porter swung down, removing his hat in a slow, respectful greeting. The sun and countless miles had chiseled his face, giving him the steady look of a man who had seen too many storms pass over his people. "Afternoon, Belle," he called, striding toward her among the fragrant plants. Zane had grown up with Wade Rowan, and after the funeral remained one of the few to check on her. Belle rested her basket on a stump and met his gaze. "What brings you out this way?" she asked, noting the furrows of concern and the way he kept scanning the distant hills. He brushed desert dust from his face, a gesture that said more than words. "Heard Cyrus Flint and Grant Steele came calling this morning. Thought I'd ride by and be sure all's quiet." "News runs faster than a stagecoach in this town," Belle replied, watching his dark eyes sweep the horizon like he expected trouble to still be near. "Flint's men don't slip through unnoticed," he agreed after a pause, glancing at her sure hands moving through the sage. They settled on the hand-carved bench Wade had built beneath the lone cottonwood, its wide branches giving the only true shade on the spread. For a long moment, Zane rolled his hat between calloused palms, weighing his words. At last he spoke straight. "That outfit isn't playing by any rulebook I know. Folks who turned them down have run into incidents." Belle's face stayed serene, but her eyes narrowed with sudden focus. "What kind of incidents?" His jaw set beneath the streaks of gray in his beard. Water pumps failing for no reason, fences sliced, cattle dead with no sign of sickness. Always enough to rattle a family, never enough to take to court. The lines at the corners of his eyes deepened. Amos Crow found 2 of his best horses dead by the trough last month. Signed over his water rights the week after. Inside Belle's mind, the old training clicked awake, assessing weak points, laying out cause and pattern as naturally as breathing. Precision harassment pressure aimed where it hurt most. "Have you investigated?" she asked evenly, though she already sensed the truth. Zane let out a long, dry breath. "We've tried. No witnesses, no proof. And the county cut our rural patrol budget. Hard to cover the ground we used to." He met her eyes with the plain honesty of a lifelong friend. Belle nodded each fact, sliding into place with chilling clarity. "I appreciate you telling me. She said, her fingers absently tracing the beadwork on her belt. White Elk's gift when she completed her training. "I worry for you," Zane said quietly. "You're out here alone. To those men, this land is just dollars on a ledger, not something sacred." "I can take care of myself." Belle answered the simple words, carrying a depth he couldn't fully guess. "Wade always said you were the strongest person he knew," he murmured. "Still, maybe let someone help, at least for a spell." 3 days later, Belle saddled her horse and rode into Iron Bend for the monthly council. The modest hall buzzed with talk of water rights and harvest festivals. As she tied her horse, she spotted several well-dressed strangers loafing near the saloon, eyes sweeping the street with the cool discipline of soldiers or lawmen. Inside Judge Owen Frost, the town's mayor was already on his feet, his voice full of practiced optimism. "Friends, we stand on the edge of great growth, thanks to Silver Creek mining," he proclaimed. Belle slipped onto a bench beside Gage Hollis, the blacksmith, who had been Wade's staunch friend. His broad, scarred hands twisted his hat as the mayor went on about progress. Mrs. Rowan Frost called when he spotted her. "Care to share your thoughts on Silver Creek's generous proposals? I hear they've made you quite an offer for that old trading post." Every face turned her way, curious, cautious, some openly hostile. Belle rose with unhurried grace, betraying none of the steel coiled inside. "Every landowner must decide what their ground is worth," she said evenly. "But remember what follows when the silver's gone and the company moves on to richer claims." A hush spread through the room, her calm warning carrying farther than any shout. A low ripple of voices moved through the room as Cyrus Flint stood every inch the polished Easterner. "Mrs. Rowan raises an important question about what lies ahead," he said smoothly. "That's exactly why Silver Creek intends to build a permanent headquarters here, bringing steady wages for decades." Before Belle Rowan could speak, the doors banged wide, and Marshal Zane Porter strode in, his face drawn tight. "Judge Frost." "There's trouble at South Creek," he announced. "Somebody's thrown up an illegal dam cutting off water to the Red River Clan's farm." Chairs scraped, and ranchers surged to their feet, fearing their own wells might be next. In the sudden clamor, Belle caught sight of Cyrus slipping out a side door with one of the sharp-eyed strangers she'd noticed earlier, the two of them locked in an urgent private talk. That night, riding home beneath a sweep of hard, glittering stars, Belle felt a shift in the wind, just as White Elk had once taught her to sense the warning before conflict. Something had begun that wouldn't end quietly. By morning, the first strike appeared. Her water pump had been tampered with cuts so exact a casual glance would miss them. Instead of fixing it, Belle crouched low, reading the signs in the dust. 2 men had come from the east well before dawn, one heavier than the other, both in polished city boots instead of frontier gear. She traced their trail to the far boundary, where a dry creek bed gave them secret cover from the main road. Bold as coyotes, they hadn't bothered to hide their slow, confident pace. That afternoon, she guided her horse into town and stopped at Gage Hollis's blacksmith shop. His 15-year-old apprentice, Luke Blackhawk, greeted her with a crooked smile that showed the gap in his teeth. The boy, half Apache himself, had lost his parents to smallpox 2 winters back and found refuge at the forge. "Good to see you, Miss Belle," Luke called, laying aside the glowing horseshoe he'd been shaping. "Gage rode over to deliver an order to the McKay family, but he'll be back before sundown." Belle stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Luke, I need something uncommon, something no one will guess for what it really is." Recognition sparked in the boy's dark eyes. "Like the hidden knives my grandmother Wachiwi Dawn once carried," he whispered, sensing a shared heritage and purpose. All through town, Belle felt the weight of watching eyes. Not the ordinary stares a lone woman might draw, but the precise tracking of men who had mapped her habits and were setting their pieces for a harsher move. When darkness fell, she returned like a shadow. Slipping between alleyways, she reached the back of Zeke Carver's bank, where the summer heat often left a rear window cracked. Inside, she moved with silent certainty, guided only by moonlight. The banker's office stood unlocked, a testament to the small town's fading trust. The safe yielded quickly to the trained patience of her ear, each tumbler falling like a note in an old song. Inside lay exactly what she'd expected: secret maps of underground water veins that differed from public filings, plus property deeds already claimed by Silver Creek without purchase. One folder chilled her blood. Operation Silverback, a blueprint to seize the valley piece by piece, using intimidation and political strings. Her own homestead was circled in red marked Phase 2 priority. Another page, covered with neat but ruthless handwriting, described how controlling water would force the last holdouts to sell. The signature at the bottom was not Cyrus Flint's. It belonged to Grant Steele, the mining company's director of acquisitions. Belle copied the most critical details with the flawless memory techniques White Elk had drilled into her. Just as she prepared to slip out, muffled voices drifted in. Peering through the curtain, she saw Judge Owen Frost conferring with Cyrus, and a well-dressed stranger she instantly recognized as Grant Steele. "The Apache reservations aren't our concern, Mr. Steele," the mayor said with cold practicality. "Those treaties can be rewritten once we control the Territorial Water Rights Commission." Steele's answer was pure ice. "Treaties are only words on paper, Judge. Silver Creek deals in silver land and results." Belle slid out the back moments before the night watchman passed by her mind, snapping the pieces together. This was no mere mining project, but a full-scale land and water grab reaching into territorial government. On her way home, she paused atop a ridge and spotted 2 armed men circling her property. Their stance betrayed professional training, not local ranch work. From the dark, she overheard them talk with careless cruelty. "Steele says once the Red River Clan's place dries up, we head for the trading post next one," said. "That widow won't last a week without water." Their easy certainty proved they expected no pushback from the law. The fix was already in. Dawn was just breaking when Belle finally rode through her own gate. A faint scuff of movement caught her seasoned eye. Fresh boot prints near the fence told her someone had waited there for hours watching and then heading back toward town. The first shots of the coming war had been fired, even if no guns had yet spoken. Inside the quiet trading post, Belle Rowan lifted the loose floorboard beneath her bed, exposing a hidden cache she hadn't touched since first setting foot in Iron Bend. Within lay a braided leather sheath, holding 4 perfectly balanced throwing knives, each bone handle etched with ancient Apache signs. Beside them rested the sacred blade itself, the Ujjayi, a curved knife shaped to follow the natural arc of a human strike, passed through 7 generations of her mother's people. Her fingertips traced the familiar carvings, and memory surged like desert wind, endless hours under a blistering sun, palms, bloodied muscles burning White Elk's quiet voice, guiding her until every move became pure instinct. These blades were never about thirst for blood. To Belle, they were inheritance, a living bond to ancestors who had endured and survived. Wade Rowan had always grasped that deeper meaning, listening without judgment, as she explained how each motion was also a prayer. That evening, the whistle of the northbound train echoed across Iron Bend. From a shadow near the station, Belle watched 5 men step down from a private car, their controlled movements betraying military discipline beneath civilian clothes. Clearly, Dust Creek riders in everything but name. Waiting for them stood Cyrus Flint, who pointed them toward waiting horses, and spoke in hushed tones she couldn't catch. From her cover behind the water tower, Belle studied their faces, fixing every detail in memory. One man, tall with a scar running from temple to jaw, carried himself with the authority of a commander. The group rode straight to Silver Creek's new office in the old Assayers building, where lights burned far into the night. This was no simple mining security. By morning, Marshal Zane Porter had noticed as well. Finding Belle at the general store, he pretended to browse bolts of cloth while speaking low. 6 more came in on the morning stage, he murmured. Look like former cavalry, and everyone's packing an army colt under those coats. Belle chose a spool of thread, her face unreadable. Any reason given for bringing in so many men, she asked, though the papers she'd seen left little doubt. Zane shook his head. Flint says they're guarding equipment after vandalism. But I count 15 armed men, already more than this town sees on a whole cattle drive. The territorial marshal should hear about this, Belle said, well aware that the corruption she'd uncovered likely reached that office. Zane's grim look confirmed it. I sent a telegram 3 days back, he replied. The answer came signed by Judge Owen Frost, stating, Silver Creek has every right to its security force under their development contract. That signature belongs to Grant Steele's own brother-in-law. That night, Belle returned to the rituals she hadn't dared in years. In a starlit clearing behind the trading post, she began the sacred drills. Movements once buried came alive, flowing smoother with each breath until mind and muscle worked as one. Throwing knives cut through the dark with unerring accuracy, striking the hay-stuffed pine targets she'd set to muffle sound. For 2 relentless hours, she trained until sweat cooled like night rain on her skin, and the Ujjayi gleamed beneath the constellations. Thunder watched from the shadows, his golden eyes steady and alert. As Belle finished the final sequence, an unseen presence brushed the edge of her senses. Without breaking form, she pivoted and sent a knife flashing through the dark. The blade thudded into a pine trunk, exactly 1 inch from Luke Blackhawk's head, as he ducked. You move like the wind spirits my grandmother spoke of, the boy whispered, stepping out wide-eyed. She said the old ones could dance with blades till they vanished. Belle didn't scold him for spying. She recognized the moment, just as White Elk once had with her. How long have you been watching Luke? She asked, retrieving the knife. 3 nights, he admitted, eyes dropping to his worn boots. Since I heard Flint's men talk about making an example of you to scare the other holdouts. They mean to burn you out, Miss Belle. The warning only confirmed her suspicions, but his next words pierced deeper. I want to help. My grandmother Wachui Dawn taught me some of the old ways before the fever took her. At first light, Belle rode to the far edge of her land, where a hidden spring fed a rock-fringed pool. This sacred place was why Wade had chosen the property, knowing its meaning to her bloodline. She knelt by the clear water and began the purification rite White Elk had taught, casting sacred herbs on the surface and praying to the 4 directions not for victory, but for clarity. The sun was climbing toward noon when Thunder's low growl warned of riders. Through a narrow break in the rocks, she watched 3 of Silver Creek's men studying her property line, marking a map and talking openly. Steele wants this wrapped up inside a week, one said. The widow gets 1 more chance to sell, then we move to phase 2. The McKay family's place burned down real nice. Every word carried across the still morning air, a threat as clear as gun smoke at high noon. That evening, Luke Blackhawk slipped through the trading post's back door, a slim leather bundle hidden under his worn shirt. Determination far beyond his 15 years lit his eyes as he set the bundle on Belle Rowan's counter. Gage Hollis doesn't know I took these, he whispered, unfolding the leather to show finely wrought metal tools. I forged them myself after hours, lockpicks, tension wrenches, and these. He tapped 3 small, star-shaped pieces, throwing stars inspired by stories from his grandmother, Wachiwi, Dawn. Belle tested one edge with her thumb, admiring its perfect balance. "You have a rare hand for metalwork, Luke," she said. "My grandmother used to say I had the hands of an ancestor who made weapons for Chief Cochise," he replied with quiet pride. "She taught me more than just smithing before the fever took her." Belle understood the weight of that legacy sacred skills kept alive in secret. "Show me," she said, simply leading him into the open ground behind the post. Under fading dusk, Luke moved through footwork patterns she recognized at once, the old southwestern Apache steps, built for sure footing on rough land. His form was raw, but the core was there. "You've been taught well," Belle said as he finished. "But there are refinements that decide whether you walk away from a fight or win it." For the next hour, she adjusted his stance, showing how a subtle shift of weight meant both speed and steadiness. Luke soaked in every word, as though reclaiming a birthright. While they rested beside a small fire, Luke shared what he'd overheard. "The Silver Creek men are getting ready for something big," he warned. "I heard Cyrus Flint say they need everything locked down before a major investor arrives next week. They've brought in crates that don't look like mining tools hauled upstairs over the saloon after dark." Belle weighed his report. The boy's quiet movements around town and his place in the forge made him the perfect scout. "Tomorrow, create a distraction near their office," she instructed. "I'll slip inside and see those crates for myself." As the fire died to embers, Luke hesitated. "Miss Belle, if things turn bad, will you teach me to use the ujjayi?" My grandmother spoke of it with awe. The question hung heavy. Passing on the sacred blade art meant taking him as a true student. Belle studied him in the flickering glow, seeing past youth to the steel inside. "The first lesson starts at dawn," she said at last. "Come ready to work harder than you ever have at the forge." A fierce smile crossed Luke's face. "I'll be here before sunrise," he promised, vanishing into the dark with a silence that impressed even her seasoned senses. After he left, Belle opened the hidden compartment beneath her floorboards and drew out a small wooden box she hadn't touched since coming to Iron Bend. Inside lay a braided horsehair cord knotted for timing drills, the very tool White Elk had used to teach precision. By moonrise, she had set subtle alarms around the post crates stacked to crash if nudged jars placed to flash moonlight when shifted. She honed the ujjayi's edge one final time, feeling the unity of the quiet widow she seemed, and the warrior she still was. The following night settled over Montana with an unnatural hush, as though the prairie itself held its breath. Belle crouched on the roof, thunder hidden below, waiting for her call. Stars scattered across the high sky gave just enough light for her trained eyes to catch movement on the eastern approach, 3 riders advancing carefully awkward in terrain they didn't know. She recognized Rex Dugan, the scar-faced professional from the train, his hand signals revealing seasoned command. 2 more crept in from the south along the dry creek bed, the same path used to sabotage her water pump. Their easy posture said they expected nothing more than to frighten a lone widow. Belle lay motionless, breathing in rhythm with the timbers, as White Elk had taught her, until she was part of the roof itself. The men closed in, unaware of the eyes that tracked them. At 50 yards, Rex paused, lifting a spyglass to study the trading post. Belle had left a bedroom lamp glowing to suggest quiet reading. Satisfied, the Dust Creek riders moved in with drawn weapons, their approach as smooth as a practiced strike, straight into the trap she had prepared. The pair who had crept along the dry creek slid toward the back door, while the others fanned out to block every escape. The first warning came when one brushed a near-invisible strand of horsehair Belle Rowan had strung between two barrel cacti. To an untrained ear, the soft chime was nothing, but to Belle, it fixed the intruder's exact position. She moved like wind through timber, dropping from the rear roof beam and landing soundless behind the post, just as the men bent to the lock. A knife left her hand in a blur, burying itself in the doorframe inches from the lockpicker's ear. Both spun guns half raised, startled by the calm figure outlined in silver moonlight. "You're trespassing on private property," she said evenly, every word edged with quiet authority. They traded uneasy glances, unprepared for a direct challenge. The taller man forced a crooked smile. "Mrs. Rowan, you've got us wrong. We're security men just checking for rustlers." Belle stepped closer until the moon caught the second throwing knife poised in her right hand. With lockpicks and unregistered Colts, she asked, voice dry as desert dust. From the shadows, Rex Dugan, the scar-faced commander she'd marked at the train station, appeared with his revolver already leveled at her chest. "Enough games, widow," he barked. "Silver Creek Mining filed title on this land this morning. You're the trespasser now." It was the very bluff she had foreseen in the forged deeds she'd uncovered at Zeke Carver's bank. Belle tilted her head, weight shifting to the balls of her feet. "Strange," she said. "Marshal Zane Porter never mentioned a change of ownership when he stopped by today." The hint of lawman backup sparked a flicker of doubt just long enough. In that heartbeat, Belle struck faster than the eye could follow. Her knife ripped through the dark and slammed into Rex's gun hand, sending his revolver spinning into the dust. Before the others could aim, she became pure motion flowing between light and shadow, disabling joints and nerves with unerring precision. In moments, 4 armed Dust Creek riders lay groaning in the dirt, their weapons kicked out of reach. Only Rex remained upright, clutching his bleeding hand, his face tight with pain and sudden comprehension. "Who are you?" he demanded as she advanced the curved Ujjayi, catching cold moonlight. "No ordinary widow," he muttered, backing off. "I am Belle Rowan," she said, voice low and steady. "Granddaughter of White Elk of the Chiricahua Apache. This land has been under my protection since the day I arrived." Recognition flashed in his eyes at the name White Elk. Without another word, he turned and bolted into the darkness, leaving his men in the dust. Dawn was streaking the horizon when Marshal Zane Porter rode in, guided by Luke Blackhawk, who had kept watch from the rocks. The boy's eyes shone with pride as he helped the marshal bind the captives. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest," Belle Zane warned, while cinching the last prisoner to a saddle. "Once Grant Steele and Cyrus Flint hear of this, they'll throw everything they've got at you." Belle wiped the Ujjayi clean and slid it back into its sheath. "That's exactly what I'm counting on," she said. "And I won't stand alone when they come." By midday, the story blazed across Iron Bend. Some townsfolk shrank from Silver Creek's reach. Others, hardened by loss, were ready to resist. Gage Hollis closed his blacksmith shop first, arriving with supplies and an old Sharps rifle. "Wade was my friend for 20 years, he declared, massive hands checking the rifle's action. "I'll be damned if I let those eastern vultures rob his widow." Soon, the Red River clan arrived, bringing food and strong backs. Their elder Amos Crow approached Belle with solemn respect. "The water spirit spoke your true name to my wife in a dream. Daughter of Two Rivers," he said in Apache. By late afternoon, more allies rode in, ranchers who'd lost cattle to accidents, shopkeepers bullied to sell families whose wells had mysteriously run dry. As the sun bled gold across the mesas, 27 men and women stood ready at the trading post. From the porch, Belle unrolled the secret maps and deeds she'd taken from the bank. "Silver Creek isn't after ore," she told them. "They mean to own every drop of water in this valley." Gasps rippled through the gathering as she pointed out the survey marks. Once they divert the watershed to their rail town's Iron Bend, and every homestead around it will be left to blow away with the dust. The crowd stiffened with resolve, the first sparks of a citizen army ready to defend the land they called home. Luke Blackhawk stepped forward, the metal stars he'd forged glinting in his hands. "Miss Belle taught me we're fighting for more than land," he said, voice steady and strong. "We fight for the right to shape our own future, not to be ruled by men in distant offices who care nothing for our lives." The boy's conviction swept through the gathering like prairie fire. Folks who had come only to listen now moved forward, pledging their help. By nightfall, 35 defenders stood ready. Belle Rowan organized them by skill and knowledge of the land, shaping a defense that turned every ridge and dry wash into an advantage. The trading post would be their anchor, but the real battleground would be the hills and arroyos all around. Meanwhile, in Iron Bend, Silver Creek tightened its grip. Cyrus Flint telegraphed for more muscle after hearing of the failed night raid, and Grant Steele himself arrived on the afternoon train, his cold fury plain as he set up headquarters at the hotel. Judge Owen Frost, sensing power shifting, tried to keep one foot in each camp. When the mayor nervously rode out to Belle's post at dusk, sweat streaked his face, despite the cool air. "Mrs. Rowan, surely we can end this without more trouble," he stammered. "Mr. Steele has authorized triple the original offer for your property." Belle studied the man who had bartered away his town. "The time for offers is over, Judge. Go back and tell Silver Creek this pullout completely, or face consequences no money can cover." As darkness settled, Belle gathered her inner circle. Marshal Zane Porter, Gage, Hollis, Luke Blackhawk, and the elder of the Red River clan, Amos Crow. Spreading a hand-drawn map on the table, she said, "Tomorrow they'll come. Heavy sure their numbers and guns will win the day. But we know every rise, every hidden spring. That knowledge is our strongest weapon." By dawn, the land itself bore her plan. Overnight, the defenders had reshaped gullies and rock faces into subtle traps that would funnel attackers into deadly pockets. From her lookout on the roof, Belle saw the first dust clouds. A force of at least 50 riders with 3 wagons rolled steadily toward them, more than she'd counted on. At the head rode Grant Steele, immaculate in an Eastern suit, a silver-handled riding crop resting in his gloved hand. Beside him, Cyrus Flint looked small and uneasy, his authority gone. Belle signaled her fighters with brief flashes of mirror light, an old Apache sun signaling method invisible to outsiders. The column halted about 300 yards out, just beyond good rifle range. Steele sent a single rider forward under a white flag, a thin veil of civilized talk before violence. The messenger, one of the new men from the train, reined in at the edge of Belle's land. "Grant Steele, Director of Western Operations for Silver Creek Enterprises, demands immediate surrender of this property and all persons unlawfully gathered," he called. Belle walked onto the porch, her stance calm, her voice carrying like a rifle crack across the morning. "There will be no surrender. Silver Creek is trespassing here." The messenger wheeled back. Steele conferred briefly with his lieutenants, then raised his hand. The army split into 3 prongs, circling to surround the post, while the wagons stayed back under heavy guard. The first of Belle's defenses sprang to life. Tripwires triggered rockfalls on the eastern ridge, spooking horses and breaking formation. Hidden marksmen opened fire from cleverly disguised nests. What Steele meant as a crushing show of strength turned to confusion as his men met ambush from every side. Generations of Apache tactics came alive in Belle's plan. She moved through the fight like flowing water, her curved ujjayi flashing in the sun as she disabled attackers with clean, decisive strikes, always using their momentum against them. Luke Blackhawk proved his worth too. The stars he had shaped, cut through the fray, shattering rifle stocks and knocking pistols aside without wounding flesh, just as Belle had drilled into him during dawn lessons. Desperate Steele ordered the wagons forward. Canvas covers flew back to reveal not freight, but Gatling guns, weapons of war disguised as mining gear. But Belle had foreseen that as well. At her signal, Gage Hollis and 3 ranchers loosed the irrigation channels she'd prepared overnight. Water roared from a hidden spring, turning the hard pan beneath the wagons into a sucking mire. The heavy guns bogged to their axles, the grand assault bogging with them. Realizing the fight had swung against them, many of Grant Steele's hired guns tossed down their weapons and bolted. The few who stayed grew frantic, forcing their way toward the trading post where they believed Belle Rowan directed the defense. Steele himself, abandoned by retreating men, made a last furious charge at the main building. With 6 die-hard guards, he smashed through the front door, only to meet Thunder crouched in the shadows, yellow eyes gleaming like coals. The wolfdog lunged at the lead man, sending him sprawling. Gunfire cracked wildly as the rest scattered in panic. Belle slipped in through the rear, moving with the lethal calm that had made White Elk's name a legend. Her throwing knives struck true disarming 3 attackers before they even sensed her presence. Steele backed against the counter, the mask of control gone from his face. "Who are you?" he demanded, jerking a derringer from his vest with a trembling hand. "I am what you awakened," Belle answered, the Ujjayi balanced perfectly in her palm. "Threaten land held sacred for generations, and you rouse its guardians. Try to steal the waters that sustain our people, and you bind those people together." With a desperate shout, Steele fired. The shot went wide as Belle flowed aside, her blade flashing once to slice the tendons of his wrist without taking his life. He crumpled, clutching a useless hand. Moments later, Marshal Zane Porter entered with deputies and newly arrived territorial marshals finally answering his urgent calls for help. On the counter lay Silver Creek's forged deeds and Steele's written orders for violence evidence, plain as daylight. In the weeks that followed, the Battle of Iron Bend Territorial, investigators flooded the town, uncovering the wide net of graft Silver Creek had spun. Steele and Cyrus Flint faced federal charges for water rights theft fraud and hiring armed men to terrorize lawful owners. The documents Belle had recovered proved key, exposing a conspiracy that reached to the territorial capital. 3 judges, a land commissioner, and several officials were stripped of office. Judge Owen Frost tried to flee, but was caught at a stage station 50 miles south with bags of Silver Creek cash and forged land deeds sealing his fate with the rest. The ordeal reshaped Iron Bend itself. Neighbors who once quarreled now worked side by side to repair what had been broken. The territorial governor, eager to cleanse his name, placed the watershed under special protection and formally recognized the ancestral water and land rights of indigenous families long denied their claims. For Belle, victory brought an unexpected calm. The widow and the warrior parts of herself, divided since Wade Rowan's death, now stood as one. Each dawn, she trained Luke Blackhawk, whose gift with both forge and blade embodied the meeting of old and new. Word of their stand traveled fast newspapers, spinning tales of the Apache widow who shattered a corporate army. Some swore she had called spirit warriors from the ancient mesas. Belle only smiled. Such legends, she knew, would keep other profiteers at bay. Marshal Porter was soon appointed to a territorial water rights post, his honesty during the crisis earning wide respect. Before leaving, he rode out to the trading post one last time. "Wade would be proud of what you've done," he said, gazing over a valley now secure and united. At the forge, Gage Hollis expanded his shop, taking on Luke and 2 more apprentices. Their tools, blending frontier practicality with traditional Apache design, found eager buyers across the territory. Freed from the illegal dam, the Red River clan's farm thrived, their age-old irrigation methods proving more enduring than anything Silver Creek had planned. Farmers came from far settlements to learn their ways, weaving a new network of shared knowledge. Water, the very prize of the conflict, became the foundation of Iron Bend's rebirth, and the lasting symbol of the stand, led by Belle Rowan. A new town council soon took shape, one that welcomed every resident, including families of the Red River clan and others long kept out of power. Together they set rules for land and water that honored both practical needs and the sacred ties of their people. The trading post changed too, adding a small school where Belle Rowan taught reading arithmetic and the deep history and traditions the territory's schools ignored. Children of every heritage learned side by side, hearing stories that rooted them in the land itself. One crisp autumn morning, a year after the battle, Belle stood beside the hidden spring that had meant survival for them all. Nearby, Luke Blackhawk moved through the most advanced forms of the knife dance, each step flowing with the ease of true mastery. "My grandmother said knowledge travels like water," Luke said, sliding his training blade back into its sheath. "You can dam it or turn it for a while, but it always finds its way to those meant to hold it." 5 years passed, and Iron Bend, once a struggling settlement, grew into a thriving community known across the territories for fair governance and sustainable ways. The old trading post, now a bustling mercantile, remained the town's heartbeat. On the 5th anniversary of what neighbors proudly called Liberation Day, people came from 3 territories to celebrate and to see the legendary daughter of Two Rivers and the town that had defied corporate power. From her porch, Belle watched dancers from 5 tribes circle the square in prayer and song, proof that Iron Bend had become a refuge where ancestral ways and new times could meet in harmony. The silver seams that once lured Grant Steele's company were finally mined, but only through a cooperative owned by local families. Its profits paid for schools, medical care, and the guarding of sacred places. Even the territorial governor joined the celebration publicly, admitting the wrongs that had nearly destroyed the valley and signing a landmark law called the Two Rivers Doctrine, protecting watersheds for future generations. Luke, now 20 and tall beside Belle, had embraced his calling as both craftsman and protector. His workshop blended blacksmithing with Apache artistry, creating tools and ceremonial pieces sought across the West. His greatest work stood in the town center, a monument of reclaimed metal, shaped as many hands clasped around a single flowing stream. At its base, words in English and Apache read simply "One Community." Thunder, older now but still sharp-eyed, sat at Belle's side, a living emblem of the wild strength that had helped save their home. Children played beneath the ancient cottonwood, its mighty branches sheltering the expanded post among them, descendants of those who once faced down Silver Creek together. Heritage now bound them not apart, but as one people. Territorial newspapers carried Belle's story far and wide, weaving it into legend. Some accounts stretched the facts, but the heart of the tale never wavered. One woman, true to every strand of her heritage, had changed the course of Montana's growth. Belle's apothecary of healing herbs grew into a full school of medicine, where she trained new healers in both frontier and Apache practices. Knowledge once hidden now flourished, openly preserved in carefully written books for generations yet to come. The sacred Ujjayi knife still rested at her hip, not as a weapon of war, but as a symbol of protection and a teaching tool. As twilight set the distant mesas aflame with red and gold, Belle walked once more to the spring that had carried them through their darkest hour. Kneeling beside its clear waters, she offered thanks to the four directions, honoring the eternal balance between what the earth gives and what must be returned. As Belle rose from her quiet prayer at the hidden spring, a lone rider came into view on the far horizon. A young woman guiding a spotted mare, a bundle wrapped in bright Apache cloth, tied behind her saddle. Marshal Zane Porter had written weeks ago about his niece left without kin when fever swept through her camp, and now seeking the teacher whose name carried across the territories. The circle of tradition was closing just as White Elk had foretold when he first saw promise in a mixed heritage girl decades earlier. Belle's fingers brushed the silver and turquoise pendant at her throat, feeling the unbroken chain to those who had walked these lands before her. Overhead, night deepened until the Montana sky blazed with stars, the same constellations her ancestors had followed across deserts and mountains. She stepped forward to greet the rider with a calm, welcoming gesture. Here was the next guardian of ancient skills and frontier wisdom come to learn not only how to survive, but how to live with courage and balance. Belle knew she would pass on everything entrusted to her, the discipline of the Ujjayi, the harmony of land and spirit, and the quiet strength that endures when steel and silver fail. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.